Okay, shall we begin? I don't think anybody else is going to show up today. Om Sadashiva Samarambam
Sarvam
Haryama
Shang
Asmadasharya Paryanta
Saryam Paryantam
Vande Guru
Vande Guru
Param
Param
Ishvaro Guratmeti Murti Veda Vibhagine Yomapta Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Tava Vedanta Sedanta Gocharam Tamagocharam Govindam Paramanantam Satguru Pranatosh Maham Om Shanti 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 Om. So namaste. Welcome to our Vivekachudamani class. So we stopped last week on the verse 19. A qualified teacher is one who knows the import of the scriptures by directly knowledge experience and whose mind is resolved in awareness. As we always say, in awareness, as awareness. It's very important to show that as awareness in there. His mind glows like the coals of a wire of fire deprived of fuel. He can yield the means of knowledge confidentially. He is compassionate without a reason, unaffected by desires for objects, and he is friendly or her is friendly to the seekers who approach him or her with a proper attitude. So last time I just did a brief commentary on the verse. We can move here on the commentaries of Dayananda, which were added by Ramji somewhat. The catalog of the teacher's qualifications includes characteristics already discussed, such as knowledge of the teachings of Vedanta and compassion. But it also, this verse stressed that the teacher must be free. So when it says here, the qualified teacher is one who knows the import of the scriptures, and his or her mind was resolved in awareness, as awareness. So it means to say that it's not enough to know the teachings of Vedanta, but these teachings of Vedanta must, in the first place, transform the teacher, the person sharing it. The person sharing this knowledge should be an example of a teaching that was converted, or has transformed one's emotional personality, as sometimes we say. So one must be transformed in the sense that the sense of the ownership and doership needs to be neutralized, because this sense of the ego, the sense of I am the doer, I am the thinker, I am the control of my life, this has to be gradually neutralized. This is what's called the fructification of self-knowledge, is the gradual cancellation of this ego sense of I am the doer, I'm the thinker, and so on. So this knowledge must do its job, and its job is to gradually to cancel the sense of doership of the ego and purify the teacher to an extent, that he is no longer driven or pushed around or governed by his or her previous binding vasanas. So, in other words, one's vasanas need to be under control, even if they surface in the mind. It may surface, but the yearning that was benefited by this knowledge, it filters. It just has certain discrimination and balance and certain purification. Another point is the yearning, because self-knowledge is the greatest purifier of the mind. So the yearning usually does not have much of this pressure coming from the causal body. His vasanas, they were to a large extent somehow neutralized, or in another language, they were converted into spiritual vasanas. They were converted sattvic, dharmic vasanas, and so on. And whatsoever residuals of tamasic or rajasic vasanas may be there, they are easily regulated, they are easily managed, you know. So therefore, the teacher must be somehow free from the tyranny of those compulsiveness, you know, of doing certain things according to one's tendencies. So those binding vasanas need to be converted in non-binding. So the first thing is the bind should no longer bind me, and then the nature of those vasanas need to be converted from tamasic vasanas to rajasic vasanas, and then to sattvic, dharmic vasanas. So we need to have good vasanas to say that this teaching has worked its miracle on us. We have good vasanas, and on top of that, these good vasanas, they are not binding. So binding vasana is a vasana that somehow pushed me around, and I have no power. I am a slave of that vasana. That kind of tendency became a habit, became an addiction, and somehow keeps pushing me. And I'm trying to fight these vasanas, and somehow I'm powerless. So such is a binding desire, binding vasana. So those vasanas, they need to gradually lose steam until they are easily regulated, managed. Okay. So this verse stressed that the teacher must be the first beneficiary, meaning to say he must be free of binding vasanas. Otherwise, what's the point? Someone goes, sits in the chair of the guru and start talking big and so on. But then in one's life, one is still cutting corners and doing things that are in violation with Dharma, you know, and because the vasanas, you know, those rajasic and tamasic vasanas is what somehow force us to sometimes, you know, do adharmic things, violating Dharma, you know, doing things that are not really okay, because the pressure of those vasanas may be sometimes so big, so great. So therefore, the teacher must be free of binding vasanas. A teacher who wants wealth or sexual favors is obviously not free of desires, yet many such teachers have succeeded for a time in attracting many followers in the West. We know, we all have somehow experienced that on different degrees. So I have been to different teachers before I came to Vedanta. My first guru was Osho Rajneesh. He was wonderful. He was the best thing that happened in my life. Yet I have never seen someone with such a huge ego, you know. He had such a beautiful, shining and radiant power and charisma and ego, you know, and he wanted what he wanted. And I could see it over the 10 years I stayed close to him. So some teachers who have the binding vasanas, so what it says of them, it says that they are not that free, because freedom is freedom from those binding vasanas. Vasanas that are based, vasanas that were cultivated and developed on my self-ignorance. Those vasanas, they are still somehow occupying one's causal body, and is still pressing, you know, pressing the subtle body, and one is, you know, is still being subject to those vasanas. So such teachers, you know, they may know who they are, but they are not what we often say free. You know, moksha, the concept of moksha, for example, you know, we say that one thing is self-realization, and I know this first-hand experience. So the first thing is to know for sure, to have this doubt-free knowledge in respect to what you are. And then you think that all is over, now I am enlightened, now I am this, I am that. And then you have to start dealing with those vasanas that are going to challenge your knowledge, challenge your certainty of I am consciousness, I am free. I say that because I went through this and it was very confusing to me, because I was talking big and I knew that it was consciousness. That was before Vedanta. But yet I was like, oh my God, why I'm feeling frustrated? Why I'm feeling like this? Why I'm, all excited, or I'm a little bit sad or disappointed with Jesus, disappointed. I was noticing that something was not right. And I was talking big still in my initial satsangs, So one thing is self-recognition or self-knowledge. I know now. So now I'm no longer searching for what I am. I know. And this knowledge is direct, aparoksha jnana. It's not direct and immediate knowledge. But yet one has to deal with the vasanas which were developed, cultivated and developed, during those days of self-ignorance that I brought with me from previous births and so on. Those vasanas, they need to somehow go through this process of conversion. They have to be converted on spiritual, beautiful vasanas based on knowledge, wisdom. It takes some time. It is a gradual process. And I often like to stress that there is no such a thing as 100% purification. If we want to look for someone who was so beautiful and so purified, almost like a saint, it was Ramana Maharaj, for example. He was so beautiful. He was so radiant. He was so dharmic. He was so loving, so peaceful, and so fair, so just. He knew, how to move in life without hurting any creature, anything, So some people may be very, very purified in that sense, but there is no such a thing as 100% purification, because there is always some rajas and tamas operating in the subtle body, because somehow those are the constituents of our subtle body, the three gunas. So we cannot have a subtle body, a reflector that is 100% sattvic, because it does not stand. It is predominantly sattvic, but it requires the three energies. Therefore, a teacher who wants all these favors, wealth, and among other favors, is not free from those compelling desires. Yet many unqualified seekers, not really seeking self-knowledge, continue to give the devotion and the money to such manifestly unqualified people. This is absolutely natural. I like to say very often that every one of us get the teacher that we deserve. I got the teacher I deserve. Not only teacher, every one of us get everything, every time what we deserve. We get the girlfriend that we deserve, the boyfriend, the wife, the job. We get exactly what we deserve. And we get the teacher that we deserve as well. So I remember later on, I was thinking like, oh my God, how could I stay? When I was into Nisargadatta Maharaj, I used to think, oh my God, how could I waste 10 years of my life with Osho Rajneesh? Why I did not come direct to Nisargadatta Maharaj? So it's very simple, because I deserved to do what I was doing in Pune. With Osho Rajneesh. I would have gone to Nisargadatta Maharaj, most probably I would just turn my back and walk away, because it was not what I wanted. It was not what I needed, moreover. So unqualified seekers will find incompetent or unqualified teachers. That's the name of the game. There are three kinds of teachers or gurus. There is an initiating guru, and then there is that motivational or inspirational guru. Initiating is just like, oh, you just do something. You do meditation. Osho gave us 108 meditations. So you just play with meditation. Meditation is the only remedy I have for you. Any problem it's going to cure, you just do things, and therapy. And then we go into other kinds of gurus, the ones that I moved on later on, which was Nisargadatta, and then later on Papaji and so on. Especially Papaji was very inspirational. They knew how to motivate us. There was a lot of shock and a lot of inspirational talks to say, you are consciousness, and get it and feel it. You know, it was very much experiential. The Shakti gives that kind of experiential feeling. So those are inspirational gurus. The spiritual market is staffed, is filled with inspirational gurus. That most everybody there teaching the direct path, the new Advaita, you know, they are inspirational and they have a value. They have a spiritual value. So when we come in the beginning, we begin with initiating guru who is going to give us a mantra or some meditations or some exercise or devotional pujas. And then we move into inspirational gurus. And then we get and then we start having this flavor of Brahman, but we're still in duality because we think that Brahman is something other than us. And then even when they say, you are Brahman, you say, yeah, yes, yes. But there is no knowledge. There is no, rational. There is no analysis of experience to back up that statement, you are Brahman and you are free. How many times I heard in the Advaita world, I say, all there is consciousness and you are that. This is a very famous one. And I love that. I would pay to go anywhere just to keep listening to that again and again. But the effect of those words would fade again and again. I was hooked to those words. I need to hear, I need to read, I need to lick the books. But there was never a relationship with a teacher who had a teaching, a systematic, a complete, extensive teaching methodology, to reveal, to prove to the individual that you are consciousness and all there is consciousness. So these inspirational gurus are good because it just gets ones in fire, I say, oh yes, I want to really know that I am Brahman, I am consciousness, and I am free. And then the third type of guru is what we call the teaching guru. The teaching guru is, usually it's not very popular because people do not believe much in knowledge. They don't want teaching, they want silence, they want experience, they want Shakti, they want to do things that they are told to do by the initiating gurus. But when we come to the teaching gurus, it's just a handful of people who have a value for self-knowledge. And knowledge as a means of freedom, of moksha. So these unqualified seekers, they get those kind of gurus to begin with. They move into a different kind of guru until they become qualified for Vedanta. And then they are going to find a teaching guru, which is of another nature. Now, the teacher should be the student's benefactor, not the other way around, meaning to say that the teacher should be serving the student, not the student serving the teacher, with let's build a home, let's build an ashram, let's build a hall and so on, and bring donation, go there and find more people, enroll more people, and let's grow this. I hear these things, for the past 10 years, again and again, I hear this about these movements. These gurus that want to come up with something and they start just enrolling and getting the first gurus and the first students and getting them to go out and find more and bring more donations and bring more things. Around Osho was all about that, more money, more money, more money to bring about his dream. So the teacher should be the benefactors, the student's benefactor, not the other way around. The best service one can give to the teacher is devotion to the teachings, because the teacher of Vedanta does not own any teaching. The teaching belongs to Ishvara. It was revealed to Ishvara by the jivas, by the rishis, as we say. And the teacher, the Vedanta teacher, is just a link in the tradition. It's someone that, to the best of one's ability, one can just try to help others to understand the logic as presented by the Upanishads. So if one wants to serve the teacher, one becomes a really dedicated student, and then the teacher is really satisfied, it's pleased. Oh my God, there is something about sharing the knowledge with people. When you find somebody that is really hot, is really dedicated, is really into it, it's such a satisfaction, to say, wow, we got somebody who is really, into it. So it's the best service we can do to the teachers. This involves the student who is devoted to the teachings. It involves studying the prescribed writings and asking appropriate questions. Some people are shy and they don't ask questions. Some people are very dedicated, very, very intense in their efforts, but somehow they are a little bit shy and they don't ask questions. That has to be taken into account as well, because I have met several people like that. We should not take it literally. Writing, asking, studying the writings and asking appropriate questions. If a teacher is unable to resolve one's doubts, it may mean that he is not a competent teacher, or that we lack the qualifications to be a proper student. In either case, Vedanta will not remove our ignorance. So we need to have a teaching, a complete, extensive body of teachings, and then we need to have somebody who is going to unfold, yell these teachings to the student, and this person should be competent enough, he should be an honest and valid teacher. And then we need to have the student, and the student as well needs to be qualified. So we need a valid means of knowledge, the teachings, and then we have a valid teacher, and then we need to have a qualified teacher. If those three factors are aligned, and then Vedanta works. If it's not, if one of these is missing, the teacher may be very inspiring and very self-realized, but if the teaching is missing, the student may be even highly qualified. If it's really highly qualified, he does not need the entire teaching. Sometimes, these few people here and there that understand who they are in contact with these direct path gurus, or these Shaktipati gurus that just throws a little bit of fragments of the Upanishads here and there with certain power, like Nisargadatta Maharaj used to do. The people who are very qualified, often they just get, but they are rare. The highly qualified people, they just get it somehow. Because they did a lot of work to preparing work in previous years or decades or births. So the teacher's mind, the verse also mentions something very nice. This is a nice metaphor. The teacher's mind should be like the glowing coals of a fire deprived of fuel. This is a very nice image. So we see that a fire is something really, really, really hungry, It has such a hunger for what? For fuel. So when the fire is there, one of the examples of samsara or metaphors for samsara is a forest in fire, a wildfire burning through a forest. So what is the nature of this fire? As long as there is fuel, it's going to keep burning. It's going to keep moving. You're going to burn everything. We had that burning, that wildfire in Paradise 2 years ago. It was just burning. As long as there is fuel, it burns. So while it's burning, the fire is really, it's very, very wild. It cracks and sparks and it grows and lessens. So it's very unstable and it's wild. But once it settles, it has consumed all of these fuels, it settles. And then in its nature, it's still produces light. but he's no longer wild. He's stable, It's what we say, it's glowing, it glows, like coals of a fire, deprived of fuel. So the fuel, in reference to this analogy, the fuels are our desires. The mind of the samsari, the mind of the karmi, is constantly burning desires. Desires are the fuels that makes our minds in fire. These fires are desires and aversions that all the time, getting us all excited and getting us all over the place. So when this fuel is consumed, when this mumukshutva, which is the desire for moksha, for freedom, consumes all these desires, so the mind of the mumuksha realizes its own nature and it becomes resolved, just like a glowing coal, the glowing coals of a fire. Once it has consumed all fuels. Okay? It's a very nice image. When a fire is being fed, it cracks, crackles, it sparks, it grows, lesson. It's all the time changing. It's never stable. It's not really quiet. Such is the inconstant mind of an ordinary man subject to desires and fears. The nature of the mind is such as a wildfire consuming desires, consuming objects of experience on a daily basis. But the proper teacher's mind, the competent teacher's mind, is like a bed of glowing coals, no longer consuming fuel. Fuel, again, it's objects of desires. It's this mind, proper teacher, the teacher who is no longer being pushed around by binding vasanas, is calm, it's steady, and it is luminous. It's brilliant. Luminous, it goes to brilliance. One of the characteristics of the Jnani is that they are more brilliant, they are more wise. So it's because the mind is more sattvic. It's calm, it's steady, and it has this luminosity that makes it brilliant, wise. The teacher is also friend to the seeker, as the verse says. What the verse says here. And it's a friend, and he's very friend to the seekers who approach him with whatsoever attitude, proper or improper attitude. Sometimes we deal with people having an improper attitude as well, and that's okay. Ignorance is tough. So the teacher is also friend to the seeker. The friendship between the Vedanta teacher and the student is a trademark of Vedanta, because we see it in the Gita and we see it in our tradition. The teacher makes itself or herself available to all students. He never puts himself or herself on a pedestal and always presents oneself as a servant, because the teacher knows that everything is consciousness. There is nothing, anything, or anybody who is not already moksha or free. Therefore, the teacher is naturally humble. He does not need to cultivate humbleness. One of the most irritating things is to see these very vain, big gurus, full of vanity and pride, trying to pretend to be humble. So the humbleness of the Jnani is humbleness based on knowledge, the understanding that everything is consciousness, and we are all consciousness, and there is no difference between the teacher and the student. Therefore, the teacher is a friend to the seeker, and also it's important that the teacher presents itself as a friend. Otherwise, immediately there is a huge block to begin with, a barrier, because nobody likes to feel like, oh, okay, I'm looking up and I'm being looking down. So everybody likes to be looked, into the eyes and say, hey, let's do this work, without it looking down and looking up and so on. the teacher is also friend to the seeker. He does not denigrate him. What is denigrate? Looking down. Okay. He does not look down at the student, but receives him with kindness and friendship, like good friends. Many self-proclaimed teachers operate in a regal setting where their students act as countiers, submissive and uncritical. Some teachers sometimes bust egos, I mean, we don't want to go much into that. I know Ramji likes to go and expose all these kind of teachers, very often. But we already covered that. So this is all part of the process. Every one of these gurus serve a certain purpose, There is no point in complaining and blaming or whining about them, because we get what we deserve, and all these gurus, they serve a certain purpose. They have a certain spiritual value, even if they behave not always dharmically, not necessarily in a dharmic manner. Any teacher who generates fear or tension should be avoided. If you don't genuinely feel your teacher is your friend, then he's not a real teacher. So our devotion to the teacher grows in proportion to the knowledge of the self we are enabled to realize through his directions. This is very beautiful, because the devotion and the respect, the appreciation, the devotion, the respect that the student develops for the teacher, it has to be earned by the teacher, I see it over the years, especially with my friends in Brazil. So the people who will benefit the most are the people that have most appreciation and respect towards me, because they got so much out of this relationship, So our devotion to the teacher grows in proportion to the knowledge that I extract through this relationship. The more I benefit, the more I have appreciation and respect, for the wisdom that is freeing me, So that it has to be earned. You cannot have a guru and say, okay, I'm going to start ashram here, but I want respect to begin with, No, you have to earn your respect. You have to behave in a certain way. Your walk and your talk has to be aligned, And I need to grow and benefit, and I need to start experiencing this freedom that the scriptures talk about. Such devotion is actually love of the self, which is the teacher, which the teacher reveals as the only self, the only reality. Yeah. Verse 21. The seeker should ask for protection from the agitations produced by involvement with samsara. This is a very nice verse. So samsara produce great agitation, suffering, anxiety, and I'd say, I forgot the name. Anyhow, these agitations produced by the involvement of samsara, it's what the student wants to get rid of. They want to be rid of this psychological condition called samsara. Samsara is a psychological condition. As we interact with the world, we develop attachment, and then we start developing expectations. And then we have our vasanas that says, I want this, I don't want that. And then we try to control and manipulate the field only so that we attract what we want and we avoid what we want. And we fail so badly that we go into all kinds of negative emotional feelings, discomfort, irritation and anger and depression and jealous and grief and sorrow and envy and hate, everything. All this range of negative emotions is based on this fundamental ignorance that, I am the jiva and I'm small, I'm inadequate, and I have to control my experience, the field of objects, so that I'm okay, I'm secure, I'm happy, I'm satisfied. And everybody fails. And then everybody goes through this psychological condition called samsara. So he comes to Vedanta and he wants protection against this problem. And the people come to me, especially there in Brazil, and say, I don't want to go back to the world. I don't want to go back to do my things because again and again I fail. And I feel so enlightened when we do these long webinars, seminars in Brazil, for example, when we do these seminars, when I go there. So everybody is really high, everybody feels totally free and so on. And people have these impulses, no, I want to get away from the world and I want to sign up for a 365 days seminar, of Vedanta somewhere away from my job, family, and other obligations. Huh? No, life is the test. Yet the student comes because he wants protection from these agitations caused by the ignorance that tells the students that he needs and he wants what he wants. He wants to get what he wants and avoid things that he does not want as a means to complete himself, to resolve himself. He did not understand yet that the world has to be let alone. It belongs to Ishwara, and we have nothing to do with it. We cannot really control the field. No, we have to do our inner work. We need to grow, prepare the mind to understand that our freedom lies in our nature as Satya. And Nitya is going to remain as it is. The jiva is going to benefit as a bonus. It's going to be more pure, more clean, more wise, and he's going to be able to navigate in samsara better because he's wiser. He can do better reading. He can answer better to the stimulus coming from the field. But overall, he has no control. Nobody has control. When you secure it, you see what's happening now. Nobody has any security. I have friends losing everything these days. People who were really stretched, have really stretched themselves too thin in their business and things like that. And then 1 month of lockdown, it's killing them in Europe and Brazil. No place where you have nobody's going to rescue you. You have debts. You have lots of debts to begin with. So we have no control. Nobody has control. Neither the Yanni has any control of the field. Okay? The Yanni knows that, and he does not even get excited about trying to control. Therefore, he does not get into these mental agitations, anxieties, and afflictions derived from this attempt to manipulate, to the setup. He knows that the only answer is to work on my mindset. The setup belongs to Ishwar. Many of the Upanishads and commentaries on Vedanta are in the form of dialogue between the student and teacher. A cry of the heart bursts from the student. He is helpless in the face of great torments and begs the teacher protection. Few of us may be given to such emotional fervor in declaring our disillusionment with the world or desire for freedom from suffering. But we feel it nonetheless. So some of us are not going to be have that emotional fervor or this romantic mind to say, oh yes, Lord, Guru, save me from, protect me from samsara, from the wildfire or from the ocean or from whatever, So not everybody is going to have such romantic emotional fervor in declaring one's disillusionment. with samsara and declaring our freedom, our desire for freedom. But everybody feels it. You know, some will feel it more in a more cool way, and some will be really like, oh my God, I can't stand it anymore. I want to be free. I remember during the days of Papaji, people would sit in front of Papaji and say, I want to be free, Papaji. I want to be free. I want to be free. And Papaji would laugh, and they would play with the person for 20 minutes until he would prove to the person that he is already free. But then in the next day or next hour, the person would forget again that, you know, and Papaji came to a point that he was so tired trying to help people to understand that they are already free, you know. Samsara is often likened, huh?
Yes.
Yeah, likened in the scriptures to a forest on fire. Now, a forest fire is unlike any other fire. Once it reaches a certain momentum, it is impossible to stop until it has consumed everything in its path. Samsara is the phenomenal world where we vainly try to find lasting happiness among objects that are constantly changing. So, and if that was not enough, the samsara is also changing. The world is changing, the samsara is changing. The samsara gets something today, and then after a few months or a few years, say, no, I don't want it anymore, so I want a divorce now. You know, but the jiva is changed, the field is changed. So how are we going to find, you know, stability? We are never going to find a stability in a field in which the objects are changing, inclusive the jiva object. Our unceasing desire is like an unquenchable fire that consumes one desire after the other. The endless succession of objects which we think will bring us happiness, and it is this fire that the student must ask the teacher to quench. So basically, it's saying that the student is asking protection from the agitation produced by the involvement. And the problem here is not the involvement, but the desires that tell the students that this object, the field is real, the objects are a real source of happiness, of peace and contentment and security. This ignorance is the fire that fuels, the fire, the desires, the fire, you know, that he needs protection against. All of all the agitations to which samsara subjects us, the most terrible is the fear of death. So we know that, and I guess this coronavirus has brought it up very, very strongly to many of us. Most terrible fear we have of all agitations, and we get agitated with desire, we get agitated with fear. Some people are more inclined to get agitated with desires and not much with fears. Some people are very fearless. Some samsaris very fearless, and they really go. They get agitated by desires. And some people, they are easily agitated by fears. They are more tamasic, but they are not as rajasic to get all stressed out with desires, you know? Different personalities. Of all agitations to which the fear of death is the greatest, so long as we identify ourselves with the objects that come and go, the fear of death will remain with us. Well, as long as we identify ourselves with the objects that come and go, I mean, furthermore, as long as we identify ourselves with the object called the body-mind construct that appears within the scope of my awareness every morning when I get up in the morning, that jiva, that body-mind construct is the first object we attach to. So as long as we attach to that primary object of attachment, it's through this primary object of attachment that we get attached to the objects of the field. The attachment to this primary object called the body-mind, it causes tremendous insecurity, vulnerability. Immediately we feel like, oh my God, I'm subject to time. I'm dying. Every morning I get up a little older. So there is incredible fear the moment that we attach ourselves, we associate our existence to the body-mind. And then, of course, as a means to protect this body-mind, what do? We get attached to objects because we project certain values to this object, and we think that if we surround ourselves with these objects of desire, and if we push away these objects of fear, if I do that, and then maybe I'm going to resolve the insecurity of this primary object, which is the body-mind. But none of these artificial, accessories are going to solve the problem of the insecurity, because it lies on the attachment to the body-mind construct. And therefore, this attachment to the body-mind causes this fear of death, causes all the agitation and the attachment to the object in samsara. And all of that is due to this fear that we may cease to exist once this body-mind goes. And we know that no matter how much money, how much possessions, how much assets I have acquired, or how hard I try to push the death thought, or show up a brave face, doesn't matter, this fear remains. It's pushed, it's suppressed, it's covered up, it's band-aid, and we try to cover it and, try to find security for the body-mind, which is an impossibility, it's an impossible job. It's an impossible mission to really provide the body-mind with security. And this coronavirus crisis now is showing to us, we have no clue of when we're gonna have the world that we were living a month ago, 2 months ago. It may never come back. We don't know. They say that many airlines are going to go bankrupt. We're gonna have much less flights. We don't know how much they're going to cost. We don't know the restrictions about moving around. Possibly we won't have much mobility, at least for the coming years. So we have no security. We don't know anything. We are totally, we are living this moment that we have no certainty about our coming years, our coming days, weeks, months, and years. Here in Italy, where I am, we have no idea when we're going to come out of lockdown. Here in the northern part of Italy, the not Piedmont, Lombardia, because it's the center of the epidemic here in Italy. In Italy, they are going to begin opening up on May 4th. And they're already telling us here that here we're going to have to stay in lockdown at least until June. So it's to say 3 or 4 months indoors, with having to prepare a self declaration or documentation declaration that allows me to go to the pharmacy or to the supermarket. So we have to be totally surrendered and so impotently surrendered, saying, okay, we have no clue how things are going to go in the future. We don't know if we're going to have, a lot of people talk about hyperinflation and whatnot and so on. So we have no clue. So this is the insecurity of the body-mind construct, and we try to build a sense of security, to push this fundamental fear of death, to the side, but we are helpless in doing that. Only the teacher can help us in this case, because only self-knowledge can free us from this insecurity. Only self-knowledge can free us from this identification with the body-mind and attachment to all objects, with everything that's coming, rising and falling in the consciousness that I am, that seems to be born and die, such as the body and mind. So only the teachings, only and also only the teacher in this context, in this in this context. But the truth is that only the student can do this job. The teacher is going to give a hand to the student, but only the student can really free himself or herself. Each one of us, we only ourselves can do it. But we need the teacher as well. We need the teacher, and the student who is qualified and who is determined to do the work. The student who has exhausted all the usual means by which people hope to become free and secure. Talk about security. The student who has tried everything possible to establish a sense of security for the body-mind construct, a sense of peace, contentment, stability, joy, satisfaction. He has tried everything by trying to move things in the field, manipulate the setup, and so on. And the student who has exhausted all his ideas, all his efforts, he has tried with wealth, pleasure, and virtues, and he is now qualified to hear the truth. So he became a mumukshu. He has gone through security, pleasures, and virtue, the three fundamental pursuits, human pursuits. Artha, Kama, Dharma. And now he is going for moksha. But one needs to come to a point of exhaustion. It's really exhausting to try to solve the problem in the field. We come to that, and that is synonymous of maturity. Therefore, now we are qualified to hear the truths of Vedanta from a competent teacher under whose protection he placed himself. It feels protected. We feel protected in the Sampradaya. When we come to Vedanta, we feel this protection. We feel so happy. The people who really understand the privilege of coming to Vedanta, they feel it. Oh my God, I'm so blessed. I feel so protected. Now I have a Sampradaya, protecting me. I have these teachers. I have this body of knowledge. I have friends helping me. I have groups of friends helping me, So I'm not alone, although I have to do my job alone, but I can get a help from my friends, So it's a great sense of protection once we come to the Sampradaya, to our Vedantic tradition. Okay. The verse 22. Anybody has anything to say, any commentary or any contribution, or you want me to keep going? Excuse me just for a moment here. I'm still having a little trouble with my throat. And I got so used of doing our meetings. In all the meetings I was doing in Brazil was morning and afternoon. It's so much more fun and more energetic. So the verse 22, the composed, saintly, enlightened teachers who have crossed the ocean of samsara are like spring, for they bring new life to inquirers by helping them to know the truth of their nature without expectation of results. I like this without expectations of results because whosoever is assigned the role of propagator of the teachings of Vedanta has to know that it's useless to feel frustrated. It's better not to have any expectation because one can try one's best to unfold these teachings from different angles, try to help the student to understand certain aspects of the teaching, you know. And it's better not to have any expectation of results because you never know when it's going to be clear, you know, when it's going to click. Once when these doubts, you know, this lack of trust in the statements of Vedanta are going to be removed. They are going to be neutralized. So there are these obstacles, and the teacher has to do his best. But it's better not to have any expectation. So the composed enlightened teachers, so anybody who has been benefited by these teachings, it's a yani, it's a wise, you know, it's saintly like, but it's not really saint because self-knowledge is not about sainthood. So the ultimate goal of every human being is spiritual elevation. I have no doubt about that. Self-knowledge somehow is an intermediary stage, but ultimately one has to become so pure, so beautiful, almost like a saint. You understand? But you have to understand that a yan is someone who knows what he is, who he is, which is the nature of everything and everyone. So a yan is the one who has the knowledge in regards to the true nature of everyone and everything. He may be more saintly when he understands it, or less saintly. He may have a certain degree of purification or not. But the yani is not a saint. A saint is something else. But as this knowledge keeps purifying one's mind, one becomes wiser and wiser, more composed, you know, and more closer to a saint. You know why? Because all those ignorance-based vasanas, they have been burning, you know, by the constant association with this knowledge and living a dharmic life, naturally living a dharmic life. It goes all these old vasanas that somehow here and there compels the yani to act not as elegantly or not as dharmically. You know, this gradually it dissipates. So the end result is that one is going to look more and more beautiful and more saintly, although there is no such thing as 100% purification. So, but these people who are more composed, more elegant, more balanced, more strong emotionally, these people who have, those people are the people who have crossed the ocean of samsara, meaning to say, we cross this ocean of desires and fears of objects, you know, this will of running after one thought, after another thought, all the time on the go, going to gain things, going to avoid things. So this is samsara. So this ocean of samsara has to be crossed, and it can only be crossed by the means of self-knowledge. So these people, these teachers, they have crossed this ocean of samsara, And in analogy, they are like the spring. When the spring comes, it brings hope. It's bring warmth. It's bring hope and beauty, and flowers. They bring new life, new inspiration. I remember when I met Ramji in Vedanta, it was like, oh my God, I was so happy. I was so happy. It was like my new life. I think, see, my entire life, and this was recent, it was 2012. I said, wow, my entire life was only to bring me to this point. When I got that book, How to Attain Enlightened, and I start going through that book, and I say, oh my God, my entire life, 30 years searching and doing all kinds of things, and now I have a new life here. This is the spring of my life. So these teachers who have crossed the ocean of samsara, they are like the spring, for they bring new life. And they help the students to know the truth of their nature. And they do so without any expectation of results. Because the teacher, he should be wise. So if the teacher is not wise, like J. Krishnamurti used to be, he could become very, very upset and angry and irritable with people who are not really understand his message. And there were other teachers that I got to know, not only J. Krishnamurti, U.G. Krishnamurti was really pissed off with people who would not understand him, for example, and many others, more in the New Age, not New Age, Neo-Advaita field. So no, the teacher who is wise has no expectations. He just does what he does because somehow he was assigned to do so. That's all about that. Here the student pledges his faith in the teacher's knowledge. He knows the teacher to be one who is no longer afflicted by ignorance. This is very important. You can only trust the teacher to the degree that you understand that he's no longer suffering from the same problem that you are suffering, which is samsara. Affliction, the desire to try to control the circumstance of one's life from the events, and controls one's experience all the time, having no demonstration of what he teach, demonstrating no trust in Ishvara as the Lord, the lawgiver, the giver of all Rabada karmas, of all jivas, and so on. So we can see. So he knows that the teacher to be one who is no longer afflicted by the problem that he's suffering. And he knows that the teacher with no desire for reward helps to deliver others from ignorance. So that's what builds respect to the teacher. It's a natural thing, The student likens the teacher to a springtime, just like when I met Ramji. As spring brings life and color back to the barren earth, the teacher caused the tender shoot of the self-knowledge to grow beautiful in the terrain, ravaged by samsara. Very beautiful, this end here. As spring brings life and colors back to the barren earth, you will see that in Africa, in this place, it becomes like so dry, like a desert. You cannot imagine that life can become so strong after the monsoon. Then comes the spring, and then comes the rains, and then life comes back. So beautiful. So this life that comes back is like a shoot of self-knowledge that grows in the terrain, which was previously ravaged by samsara. It was dry. There was no life, there was no joy, there was no peace, there was no appreciation for the terrain. Okay, verse 23. Once accepted as a student, a qualified inquirer can relax in the shade of the tree of the teaching tradition because he or she understands that Vedanta is a valid and proven means for attaining liberation. So those students, the first stage when we come to Vedanta is we start flirting with Vedanta. You know, we kind of flirting a little bit, but we're still not sure. I was still having my other sadhanas here, my other circles there, and I start just flirting with Vedanta until I developed real confidence that Vedanta can really deliver me from suffering, from samsara, from attachment. So, but once we develop this value, this trust, this confidence, this shraddha in the teachings and in the teacher, once we develop it, it takes some time. You know, it's not overnight. This value for the teaching and the teacher. Once we accept as a student, a qualified teacher can relax. Once accept as a student, a qualified inquirer student can relax in the shade of the tree of the teaching tradition. So we're talking about our tradition because he or she has grown in their value, their confidence, their trust that Vedanta is a valid and a proven means for attaining liberation. So this understanding, this value, this shraddha does not happen overnight. We need to understand that. It takes, for most people, it takes some time, unless someone is already highly mature, you know, and ready for Vedanta. When you are really so ready for Vedanta, and then it happens more or less as it did with me. When I found it, I felt like, oh, I found a treasure in here. And I have no doubt. My whole life brought me to this. You know? But it's not the case with everybody. A lot of the time, people have to go through this stage of developing shraddha, developing trust in the teachings, in the teacher. And we only develop it to the extent that we begin seeing the teachings work and see myself benefiting. Then I say, oh, it works. Oh, it's really working. You know. So if it does not work, and then like most people do, after some time, people just they go and they go back to do what they were doing, or they look for another spiritual kind of sadhana. But those qualified students, the students who have a value, have an understanding of the value of Vedanta, they come and they relax in the shade of the tree of the teaching tradition. And like Ramana Maharaji used to say, so you just relax. Just drop your baggage and relax, because now you have come to, to a place in which you don't need to go anywhere doing anything. Just listen or just be in silence with Ramana Maharaj. He used to kind of teach in silence, inspire people in silence. But he used to say that when you go from Delhi to Mumbai, so you bring all your luggage, you go into the train. So you don't keep holding your luggage for 28 hours until you go from from Delhi to Bombay. So you just drop your luggage and relax. So when we enter the bus of Vedanta, you have seen the Ramji bus of Vedanta. Then once we enter, we can relax because the driver is good and it's going to take us to our destination. We just need to relax, but we don't need to become tamasik. We need to become very, very sharp and keep doing our work while we are in the bus. As constantly, intensively, systematically, diligently, the sooner we're going to drop out of the bus, so to is a way to say. Because the bus needs, the space needs to be free again and again for other the passengers like Shemaiah told once Ramji, you know, Ramji was staying there and Ramji was getting excited and started talking too much and say, you shut up, you pay attention, shut your mouths because we don't want to hear from you anymore, pay attention. You are occupying a very, very important real estate here. And I want you out of here as soon as possible so to make room for the next guy who's coming. Therefore, shut up and listen, you know. You probably heard Ramji saying that. Huh? So what it means is the student of Vedanta can lay aside his fears, for he has found a way to become free of samsara. We have that beautiful metaphor about the tenth man. We all know the tenth man story. You know that, Claudio? The tenth man, they are crossing the river, and then they were the leader was counting how many people were there. No? Okay, very shortly. So they were on a pilgrimage, and there were 10 guys, and then there was a certain rain, and then the river got a little stronger. They had to cross the river, but it was a little bit dangerous. So they held hands and they went very carefully. But they have made a setup that we count ourselves before and we count ourselves afterward. Somehow they counted perfectly here. When we went to the other side, the guy went to count, and then he discovered that one person was missing, and he kept counting and was missing. And then everybody was really weeping and crying and say, oh my God, we lost one of our brothers. And then there was a sage or a yani, a wise person passing by and asked, what's going on? Why you guys are weeping and crying and so sad and desperate like that? And say, we lost one of our brothers. The river took my brother away. We were 10, now we are 9. And then very quickly the wise person looked around, and then he said, okay, you lined up here and I'm going to count and I'm going to produce the 10th man. What? It's impossible. The river took it. They said, I will produce the 10th man. And the wise person said that with such power, certainty, charismatic personality. Say, I will produce the 10th man. So that is the promise of the scriptures. I'm going to produce the missing man, the missing factor. I'm going to produce the missing factor here. You are overlooking the missing factor. I'm going to produce it. So when the sage said, I'm going to produce the 10th man, what happened to the people? Immediately they begin relaxing because they trust the words of the guy, of the wise, of the sage. They trust it. And then immediately their fears were gone. Okay? So the student of Vedanta can lay aside his fears, for he has found a way to become free of samsara. There is a trust in the words of the guru, the words of the scripture. So the wise man was passing by and said, you can relax, I'm going to produce the 10th man. And then he counted again, 9, 10th. So the leader of the group was just missing, was not counting himself. You understand? So he was missing out, missing himself, overlooking himself. He was counting everything the same way we are all about looking for the self, and we are just overlooking this light of consciousness by which we are doing all this counting, all this looking, all this seeking, all this searching. So when we come to Vedanta, we can relax because we have found a way to become free of samsara. Samsara in this case, in this context, is the idea that I'm missing myself here. I'm not ever present here. So we trust the scriptures, and then we immediately, our fears are resolved. We can relax. We understand this is a tradition. It's a millennial tradition. It's a proving body of knowledge that gives results. So we can rest assured that may have fallen that may have followed this path successfully. Many have followed this path successfully, and that the teacher will guide him along the proven route. But the student must give himself wholly to the teaching. So I was saying before, we go into the bus, we relax, but we cannot just relax and start drinking beer and say, oh, good, and falling asleep, and then stopping and eating some pizza, you know. No, we have to really give everything into it. The student must give himself wholly to these teachings. He has to do the work. It's not an easy job to remove ignorance. It's the most simple thing, but yet we keep missing out when we count, you know. Again and again, we overlook this conscious being, this conscious self by which I'm doing all this running around, trying to become myself or to find myself or whatever. A partial commitment will not do it. Right effort requires that we apply the truths of Vedanta in every area of our lives. So a partial commitment will not produce self-knowledge and moksha. A partial commitment will produce some spiritual growth. I like to emphasize that. A partial commitment may not produce self-knowledge and moksha, but will produce some spiritual growth because Vedanta is very powerful. Even if it does not sprout those seeds of self-knowledge, once planted, you know, they are already producing spiritual development, okay, maturity and so on. So I like to emphasize that point as well. So the right effort of the student, the right effort requires that we apply the truths of Vedanta in every area of our life. So it means Vedanta should never be compartmentalized on our meetings once, two, three times, four times a week, or our moments of contemplation or meditation. No, it has to follow us in every area and moments of our life. We have to make this knowledge alive in our minds. Yeah, as I often say, it has to become an undercurrent, you know, of contemplation, of discrimination. Again and again, we are living from that platform of knowledge. It has to really take over our mind gradually. It does not happen overnight. So this is when this effort is really, you know, intense and is conducive to this final understanding. We cannot compartmentalize the teaching and make it an occasional pastime and expect that it will work. Self-knowledge is all-consuming. Self-knowledge must consume in order to come, in order to become a hard and fast self-knowledge, a doubtless self-knowledge, it must consume all other desires. It consumes the desire for everything else. When all the desires were consumed, my only desire is self-knowledge, what's going to happen with our mind? Our mind becomes obsessed by this knowledge until, poof, the desire for moksha, desire for self-knowledge burns itself into ashes, you know? And then even that desire for moksha, that was the last piece of stress, you know, it has to go. It has no fuel. It was living or consuming all other desires, consuming. That's what it means here. Self-knowledge is all-consuming. It consumes one's life. We are going to lose gradually interest for everything that does not really have value. And we're going to keep our desire more and more focused until it has no longer fuel, and then it burns itself, and then one is done. The job is done. Okay. We stop at this paragraph. If anybody has anything to say. So you guys were, I mean, we are very few today, but people were very quiet. Nobody had anything to say so far. Does anybody has anything to say?
It's been beautiful teaching.
Huh? Mario?
Namaste, everybody. It was really a pure joy, Arlindo, to listen to you. Really, I'm so glad that I'm finally here with all of you. And I'm sorry, Arlindo, it really took me some time. I just recently saw all that list of mail with your invitations to the webinar, but that was just not possible for me to be
That's all right.
present due to nature of and you perfectly, you were from the beginning, you were speaking about topics that I was thinking all along. It was like really like peak of my interest this last couple of days. So
Nice.
I'm on perfect time. So
Good
thank you so
time.
much, and
Good time. Yeah.
really
That's all right.
really good time, and thank you so much, Arlindo. This is
Thank you, Mario.
I
It's a great
thank
pleasure
you.
having you with us.
Thank you so much, Steve.
Everybody, so,
Thank
and
you.
by the way, we meet twice a week. I mean, I'm gonna keep you
Yep.
all the time in the list.
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
have some
Please.
friends that once in a while I put in the list and then I try and then I remove from the, I have a base list and then I keep adding.
Yeah.
And,
Yes.
you know,
Yeah.
throwing a
Yeah.
little bit.
No, no.
So
Yeah.
I'm gonna keep you on the list for a little while.
Please.
Yeah.
Yeah. Please
Okay.
keep on. Please.
Okie dokie. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you, everybody. I see you next time. Much love. Big hug.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you, Claudio. Thank you.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.